Lyra, the alien princess of the Shalzar Empire, sat alone in her royal chamber, staring at the stars through the large glass window. Outside, the sky stretched out in endless shades of purple and blue, and the distant light of distant worlds flickered like tiny diamonds. Despite the beauty of the galaxy, Lyra could not find peace. Her mind was restless, constantly racing, unable to slow down enough for her to sleep. For days she had tried everything: meditation, relaxation methods from her empire's ancient traditions, even the soothing music from her planet's finest composers. Nothing worked. Every night she would lay in her vast bed, the soft silks of her sheets cool against her skin. But her thoughts never ceased. The weight of leadership, the constant pressure to be perfect, the endless duties of her position. It all piled up on her, leaving her exhausted and anxious. She was the future ruler of the Shalzar Empire, a vast and powerful civilization that spanned countless worlds, yet she felt like a prisoner to her responsibilities. She was not allowed the luxury of weakness. To her people, she had to be flawless, a perfect symbol of strength and grace, unmarred by emotion or doubt. But inside, Lyra was far from perfect. She was human, with fears, doubts, and desires that she could never show. Tonight, as the silence of her chamber stretched on, she felt it again, the familiar wave of exhaustion crashing over her. But still, sleep eluded her. She had spent countless nights lying awake, staring at the stars, trying to find some sense of calm. But tonight was different. Her frustration had reached its peak, and she realized she could not do it alone anymore. Her mind turned to the one person who had been a constant in her life for the past few months: Jackson, the human diplomat sent to her court from Earth. He had come as part of a peace mission, tasked with strengthening the fragile alliance between Earth and the Shalzar Empire. The first time Lyra had met him, she had dismissed him as just another human, small, fragile, and far less impressive than the towering figures of the alien races she had known her entire life. But as time passed, she had come to realize there was something different about him. Jackson had a calmness about him, an ability to listen that was rare even among her own people. He had never treated her like a princess, never looked at her with the awe and reverence others did. Instead, he had treated her like a person, just another individual with her own burdens. And in the silence of her sleepless nights, Lyra found herself thinking of him more and more. She had never asked for help before, never let anyone see her vulnerabilities. But tonight, it felt different. Lyra stood from her bed and walked across the room to the communication console. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the controls. Was she really going to do this? Was she really going to ask a human for help? The idea seemed strange, even laughable. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Jackson might be able to offer her something no one else could: a sense of peace. Taking a deep breath, she pressed a few buttons, and the console hummed to life. The screen flickered before showing Jackson's face. He was in his quarters, as expected, likely preparing for the day ahead. His eyes widened slightly in surprise when he saw her face, but his expression quickly softened into a friendly smile. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Is everything all right?" "It's late. I can't sleep," she interrupted him, her voice softer than she intended. She looked away from the screen, embarrassed.
"I've tried everything, Jackson."
Meditation, music, even my own people's sleep techniques. None of it works. There was a brief silence on the other end, and Lyra felt the weight of his gaze through the screen. Jackson was quiet for a moment, as though considering what she had said. Then he spoke.
"I'm sorry to hear that, Princess,"
he said, his tone kind. "But I might be able to help."
Lyra frowned slightly. "How?"
"You're human, Jackson. What could you possibly know about how to help an alien princess sleep?" He chuckled softly, a sound that put her at ease. "Well, I may not know much about alien princesses, but I do know something about humans. And I've heard that one of the best ways to relax and calm the mind is through something called guided meditation. It's a technique we use to focus the mind, clear away the stress, and promote relaxation. It's not something I've ever tried with, well, someone like you, but I think it might help. Lyra looked at him skeptically. Meditation? Are you suggesting I sit cross-legged and hum to myself like a commoner? Jackson's smile remained, though his eyes glinted with amusement. Not exactly. Guided meditation is more like a conversation, a way to help you focus on calming your mind, maybe even leading you to sleep. I can walk you through it if you're willing to give it a try. Lyra hesitated. The idea of sharing something so personal with a human made her uneasy, but the exhaustion was too much. She didn't know how much longer she could endure the sleepless nights. With a small sigh, she nodded. All right. Lead the way, Jackson. I have nothing to lose. Jackson smiled, clearly relieved that she was willing to give it a try. Great. Just find a comfortable spot. Close your eyes if you can, and focus on your breathing. I'll guide you through it. Lyra did as he instructed, settling onto the edge of her bed. She closed her eyes, but her mind was still a whirl of thoughts. About her empire, her responsibilities, the future. She tried to push those thoughts aside, but they returned, relentless. Now, take a slow, deep breath in. Jackson's voice came through the speaker, steady and soothing. Hold it for a moment, and then slowly exhale. Lyra did as he said, her breath steadying with each inhale and exhale. For the first time in days, she felt the tightness in her chest begin to loosen. She tried to focus only on her breathing, on the sound of Jackson's voice. Good. Now imagine yourself in a place where you feel completely at ease, Jackson continued. It could be anywhere, somewhere from your home, or perhaps a place you've only dreamt of. Lyra imagined a lush, quiet meadow on her homeworld, the soft hum of nature surrounding her, the air cool and fresh. It was a peaceful place, where the weight of her crown could be forgotten, and the endless responsibilities of ruling her empire could fade away. Picture yourself in that place. Jackson's voice came again, calming. You're safe. You're relaxed. No pressure, no expectations. Just you and the peace of the world around you. Lyra felt her body relax further as she followed his guidance. She had never experienced anything like this before. It was strange, almost foreign, to let go of the burden of leadership, to imagine a life without the weight of the empire on her shoulders. But in this moment, she allowed herself to feel that release. Jackson continued, his voice soft but unwavering. Now, picture your thoughts as clouds, floating in the sky. You don't need to chase them. Just let them float by, and as they pass, feel yourself becoming lighter. It was working. Lyra felt her body become lighter, her thoughts slowing, the storm inside her mind starting to clear. She hadn't realized how much she needed this. The soothing cadence of Jackson's voice, the calming imagery, she felt herself sinking deeper into relaxation. For the first time in what felt like forever, her mind was still. Good, Lyra, Jackson whispered. You're doing great. Just focus on the calm. Feel the peace of this place. As she continued to focus, Lyra felt her body becoming heavier, the exhaustion she had been carrying slowly ebbing away. It was as if she was finally allowing herself to rest, to let go, and, for the first time in days, Lyra felt her mind slip away from the world of responsibility and into a dreamless, peaceful sleep. The next morning, Lyra woke up to the soft glow of the rising sun filtering through her window. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt rested. Her body, once tense and weary, now felt light and refreshed. The events of the previous night played in her mind, how Jackson's calming voice had guided her into a peaceful sleep. She had never imagined that such a simple thing could work so effectively. It was early, still hours before the day's duties would begin. She sat up in bed, stretching her arms above her head. The room felt quieter than usual, the hum of the palace machinery distant, as if her own mind had quieted too. She glanced at the communication console by her bed and found herself considering whether to reach out to Jackson again. She had barely spoken to him since the night before, but the peace he had given her made her feel a strange sense of connection. She felt as though she owed him more than just gratitude. Taking a deep breath, Lyra walked over to the console. Her fingers hesitated over the controls for a moment before she pressed the button to activate the communication screen. The screen flickered to life, showing Jackson's face. He appeared just as relaxed as the night before, his eyes calm and thoughtful. "Princess Lyra," he greeted, his voice warm. "How are you feeling today?" Lyra smiled, a rare expression for her. "I feel better, much better. I actually slept last night. For the first time in days, I feel like myself again." Jackson's smile grew. "I'm glad to hear that. I knew you could do it."
How was the meditation?
"It worked," Lyra said, her voice almost disbelieving. "I didn't expect it to work so well. I'm actually surprised by how much it helped." "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best," Jackson replied, his tone soft. "It's all about clearing your mind, allowing yourself to relax. I'm glad it gave you some peace." Lyra sat back in her chair, her thoughts lingering on his words. Peace. That was something she had been missing for so long. As the princess of the Shalzar Empire, her every action, every word was scrutinized. She was expected to be perfect, to embody strength and wisdom. But last night, with Jackson's guidance, she had found a moment of peace, a rare thing in her life. "Thank you, Jackson," Lyra said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't realize how much I needed something like this." Jackson's expression softened, and for a moment, there was a brief silence between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Lyra realized she had been holding on to a lot more than she had let on. The weight of the crown of her role as future ruler had always been heavy on her shoulders. And although her people looked to her for guidance, she was beginning to wonder how much of that weight she could bear alone. "I'm glad I could help," Jackson said, breaking the silence. "I'm always here if you need someone to talk to." Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment, considering his words. The idea of talking to Jackson, someone from another world, about the burdens she carried seemed almost liberating. She had been so used to holding everything in, bottling up her thoughts and fears, but for some reason Jackson made her feel safe. She had never felt that way with anyone else, even with those closest to her. "I may take you up on that offer," Lyra replied softly, looking back at him. "There's so much I carry, and sometimes I wonder if anyone truly understands. I've always been the leader, the princess. I've never been allowed to show weakness." Jackson's expression turned serious.
No one is perfect, Lyra.
"Even the strongest leaders have their doubts. It's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. You don't have to carry everything alone." His words, simple but sincere, struck a chord in Lyra's heart. She had never thought about it that way. She had always been taught to be strong, to lead with confidence, and to never show any signs of weakness. But now, after hearing Jackson's gentle words, she wondered if it was okay to admit that she, too, had moments of doubt and fear. The conversation shifted to more personal topics as the hours passed. Lyra found herself asking Jackson questions about his life on Earth. She had always been fascinated by his world, a place so different from hers. His stories of Earth's bustling cities, the vast oceans, and the simple pleasures of human life intrigued her. She asked about the customs of his people, the things that brought them joy, and the ways they handled difficult situations. Jackson spoke with ease, as if he had known Lyra for years. He told her about his childhood, about his family and friends, and about the traditions of Earth that he held dear. He spoke of the beauty of nature, of quiet walks in the forest, and of the comfort of human connection. Lyra listened intently, fascinated by the way Jackson described the small, simple moments of life. They were so different from her own life, where every moment was filled with responsibility and expectation. As they talked, Lyra realized how much she had missed out on, how much of her own humanity had been buried beneath the weight of her crown. She had always been focused on the grand, the monumental, but now, for the first time in years, she found herself appreciating the small things, the things that made life feel real. Jackson, too, seemed to find comfort in their conversations. Lyra had a way of making him feel understood, of offering a perspective that was both alien and familiar. He admired her strength, her wisdom, but he also saw the side of her that longed for something more than just leadership. He saw the person beneath the crown, the woman who was capable of feeling joy, love, and fear, just like anyone else. Days passed, and their conversations became a regular part of Lyra's routine. Each night, after the palace had quieted, she would reach out to Jackson. He would guide her through another meditation session, and afterward, they would talk for hours. Sometimes the topics were light, discussions of Earth's history, of art, and of music. Other times the conversations were deeper, touching on their hopes, dreams, and fears. In these moments, Lyra found a sense of connection she had never experienced before. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She was Lyra, a woman with doubts, hopes, and desires. Despite the growing connection between them, there was still an underlying tension. Lyra couldn't help but feel conflicted. She had never allowed herself to grow close to anyone, especially not someone from a foreign planet. But Jackson was different. "But David," said Al White. He treated her as an equal, not as a ruler. And in his presence, she felt like she could finally be herself. One evening, as they sat in a virtual meeting, the conversation took a turn. Jackson asked her a question that caught her off guard. "What do you want, Lyra?" he asked, his voice soft but serious. "What do you want beyond your duties, beyond the Empire?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, Lyra was silent. She had never really asked herself that before. What did she want? What was her true desire? Was it peace for her people? A prosperous future for the Shalzar Empire? Or was it something more personal? She thought about it for a long time, her mind racing with possibilities. She realized for the first time that she didn't know the answer. She had spent so long trying to meet the expectations of her people, of her family, that she had never stopped to ask what she truly wanted. I don't know," Lyra admitted softly, her voice vulnerable. "I've always done what was expected of me. But now I'm not so sure. I've spent my life preparing to lead, to rule. But what if that's not enough? What if there's more to life than just being the princess?" Jackson's response was gentle. "There is more, Lyra. You're not just a princess. You're a person, with your own dreams and desires. You deserve to find what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled. You don't have to be bound by your title." Lyra looked at him, his words resonating deeply within her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had the freedom to choose her path. Maybe she didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. As the days went by, Lyra found herself growing more and more drawn to Jackson. There was a quiet strength in his words, a kindness in his actions, that made her feel safe. She no longer saw him just as a diplomat from Earth. He had become something more, a friend, a confidant, and someone she could turn to when the weight of the Empire became too much to bear. But with each passing day, the tension between them grew. Lyra could no longer deny the feelings that were beginning to stir within her. She found herself thinking about Jackson more than she should, her thoughts lingering on his smile, his voice, and the way he made her feel understood. Lyra was falling for him. The days grew warmer as the seasons on the Shalzar Empire's home planet changed. The nights still held a quiet peace for Lyra, the alien princess who had found solace in the presence of Jackson, the human diplomat who had been sent to her world. Their late-night conversations had become the highlight of her days. What had started as a simple request for help with insomnia had turned into something much more meaningful. They talked about everything, about their worlds, their lives, and their dreams. And in doing so, they discovered a bond neither had expected. Lyra often found herself anticipating the moment when she would speak with Jackson. His calming voice, the gentle encouragement, and the way he listened to her had begun to make her feel like she could share parts of herself she had never let anyone see. In the palace, she was always the princess, always expected to lead, to guide, to be perfect. But with Jackson, she could just be herself. She didn't have to worry about her royal duties or the expectations placed upon her. She could speak openly, without fear of judgment, and she could finally talk about the things that weighed heavily on her heart. There were moments when Lyra couldn't help but notice the change in herself. The weight of the crown, of her duties, seemed a little lighter. She found herself smiling more, laughing, something that had been rare for her in recent years. Jackson had helped her rediscover that side of herself, one that wasn't buried beneath the responsibilities of being a princess. But with this growing connection, there came a sense of tension that neither of them could ignore. Lyra began to realize that her feelings for Jackson had started to shift, to evolve into something more than just gratitude. There was a warmth in her chest every time she spoke to him, a flutter of something unfamiliar. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't expected it, but she couldn't deny that it was there. Her feelings for him were deepening in a way that both thrilled and confused her. The problem was that she was the princess of a powerful empire. Her duty was to her people, to her planet, and to the legacy of her ancestors. Her future was already decided. She was to marry someone from a respected family, someone who would strengthen the empire's alliances and ensure its future. The thought of marrying for duty rather than for love had always seemed like a distant concern, but now, with Jackson in her life, the idea felt more real. What if he wasn't just a diplomat from Earth? What if he was someone more? A person who made her feel like she could be more than just a ruler. Lyra tried to ignore the thoughts that kept creeping into her mind. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way of her responsibilities. But every time she saw Jackson, every time she heard his voice, the conflict inside her grew stronger. One evening, after a long day of meetings and royal duties, Lyra found herself walking through the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting the world in hues of orange and purple. The scent of the flowers filled the air, and for a moment, she felt like she could escape the pressures of her role. The peacefulness of the garden, the quiet hum of nature, seemed to soothe her. She found herself drawn to the fountain at the center of the garden, where the sound of water gently splashed against the stone. Sitting by the fountain, Lyra closed her eyes and let out a long sigh, allowing herself to enjoy the moment. But her thoughts soon turned back to Jackson. It had been a few hours since their last conversation, and she felt a sense of longing. She missed hearing his voice, the calm in his words. She had come to realize that she was relying on him more than she had anticipated. It wasn't just for the meditation sessions or the sleep he had helped her find. It was for the comfort he gave her, for the connection they shared. She knew she was beginning to care for him more than she should. But could she allow herself to act on those feelings? She reached for her communication console, her fingers trembling as she dialed in Jackson's frequency. The screen flickered to life, showing his face. His expression softened when he saw her. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice warm. "Is everything all right?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. She had been avoiding this conversation for days, knowing that her feelings for him had grown beyond what was appropriate. But now, sitting in the quiet garden, with the weight of her emotions pressing down on her, she realized she could no longer keep her thoughts to herself.
I don't know,
She admitted, her voice low.
I've been thinking about everything lately.
About my duties, about the future, and about us. Jackson's expression turned serious, his brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? Lyra stood up from the fountain, pacing slowly. You've helped me more than anyone else ever has, Jackson. You've given me peace when I didn't know how to find it. You've made me see things in a new light. I don't know what I would have done without you. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But I can't ignore what's happening between us. I'm the princess. I can't afford to let my emotions get in the way. My future is already decided for me. I have to marry someone of my people's choosing, someone who will help strengthen the empire. It's not something I can change, no matter how much I want to. Jackson was silent for a moment, taking in her words. Lyra could see the concern in his eyes, the hesitation as he tried to find the right words to respond. Finally, he spoke. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Lyra. I understand that your people have certain expectations of you, but that doesn't mean you have to follow them blindly. You deserve to have a life that makes you happy. You deserve to be with someone who makes you feel like you're more than just a princess. Lyra shook her head.
It's not that simple. Male?
My duty is to my people. I can't let personal feelings interfere with that. Jackson took a step closer to the screen, his expression softening. I understand duty. I understand responsibility, but I also understand love. And love doesn't always fit into the neat little boxes we try to put it in. Sometimes, love is messy. It doesn't always come when we want it, or in the way we expect. But it's real. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. She had never spoken about love this openly before, and the way Jackson spoke made her realize just how much she had been holding back. She had spent so long suppressing her feelings, trying to keep her emotions in check. But now, with Jackson's words hanging in the air, she couldn't help but wonder if she had been denying herself something real. I don't know what to do, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to reconcile my duty with what I'm feeling. Jackson's gaze softened, and he spoke gently. You don't have to figure it out all at once. You don't have to make any decisions right now. But just know that I'm here for you, no matter what. You don't have to face this alone. The warmth in his words comforted Lyra in a way she hadn't expected. She had never allowed herself to lean on anyone before, never allowed herself to show weakness. But Jackson's presence, his understanding, made her feel like she didn't have to carry everything by herself. I wish things were different, Lyra said softly. I wish I could choose for myself. Jackson gave her a small, reassuring smile. Maybe one day you will. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, the silence between them filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Lyra felt a mixture of fear and hope stirring within her. Could she really follow her heart? Could she break away from the expectations of her people and choose a different path? As the conversation ended, Lyra sat back down by the fountain, her mind swirling with questions. She didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time, she felt like she was allowed to ask the questions. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be trapped by her title. Maybe she could find a way to live a life that was true to who she was. But the path ahead was still unclear, and the weight of her responsibilities would not let her forget that she was the princess. She could not forget her duty. Yet, in the quiet moments with Jackson, Lyra began to realize that maybe there was more to life than just ruling an empire. Maybe there was a future for her that included love, connection, and the freedom to choose her own destiny. And maybe, just maybe, that future could start with the human diplomat who had shown her that peace was possible, even in the midst of uncertainty. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Lyra couldn't stop thinking about what she had spoken to Jackson the night before. It had been difficult, but she had opened up in a way she never had before. She had shared her fears, her doubts, and her deepest concerns. Jackson had listened, his calming presence like a constant, steady anchor in the midst of her emotional storm. But even with his reassurance, the reality of her situation was hard to ignore. She was still the princess of the Shalzar Empire, and her future was tied to the decisions of her people and her family. She spent most of her days attending to her royal duties, ensuring that her people's needs were met and that her empire remained strong. The weight of her responsibilities felt even heavier now, knowing that she couldn't easily ignore her feelings for Jackson. But there were still so many things that stood in the way. Her empire demanded she marry a person who could help strengthen their alliances, someone from a respected family. She couldn't just throw that all away for something as fleeting as love. Yet every time she saw Jackson, the conflict within her only grew stronger. He had become a constant presence in her life, and his understanding of her made her feel like she could be more than just the ruler of an empire. He saw her as a person, not as a title, and that made everything more complicated. There were moments when Lyra found herself wishing for a different life, one where she didn't have to carry the burdens of leadership, a life where she could be free to choose her own path, to be with the person who made her heart race, the person who made her feel alive. But that life seemed impossible. The reality of her situation was too complex. She was a princess. Her life had been planned for her since the day she was born. Her duty to her people came first, and there was no room for personal desires to interfere. Despite her internal conflict, Lyra could not avoid the inevitable. One afternoon, her father, the current ruler of the Shalzar Empire, called her to his chambers. He had summoned her, as he often did, to discuss matters of state and the future of the empire. But today there was something different in his tone, something that made Lyra uneasy. "Lyra," her father began as she entered the room, "I've been thinking about the future of our empire. You are ready to take the throne, and it is time that we start preparing for your coronation. But there is one thing left to settle." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She knew what was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel all too real. Her father continued, "You must choose your partner," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "The Shalzar Empire needs a strong alliance, and you are the key to securing it. The marriage will solidify our position in the galaxy and ensure that we remain a powerful force. I have already spoken with several respected families, and I have arranged a meeting with a suitable candidate." Lyra's mind raced. She had known this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it to be so soon. She had always known that her marriage would be a political decision, but now that it was happening, it felt like everything she had worked for was slipping away. She didn't want to marry someone she didn't love, but how could she say no to her father? How could she refuse a decision that was so important to the future of her people? "I understand, father," Lyra said, her voice steady, though her heart ached with each word. "I will do what is necessary," her father nodded approvingly. "Good. Your duty to the Empire comes first, Lyra. You must remember that. This is not about your personal desires. It is about the survival and strength of our people." Lyra stood in silence, her thoughts swirling. She had always known this was her path, but it had never felt so real, so final. She had always thought she could put off the decision, that she could somehow balance her personal desires with her duty. But now, the choice had been made for her. She would marry someone for the good of the Empire, and she would continue to carry the weight of leadership as her father had. As she left her father's chambers, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her chest. She had made her decision. She would follow the path set for her, no matter how much it hurt. But there was one person she hadn't spoken to yet, one person who had become far too important in her life to ignore. That evening, after the sun had set, Lyra found herself once again in the quiet of the palace gardens. The stars were just beginning to twinkle in the sky, and the cool breeze whispered through the trees. She didn't know what she expected from this moment, but she knew she had to speak with Jackson. She had to tell him what had happened, what she had agreed to, and what it meant for the future of their relationship. She reached for her communication console, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed in Jackson's frequency. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, standing in his quarters, looking as calm as ever. But when he saw her face, his expression softened, and he immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Lyra," he said gently. "What's going on? You don't look like yourself." Lyra hesitated, trying to find the right words. The weight of her decision was too much to carry alone, but she didn't know how to explain it to Jackson. How could she tell him that she was about to marry someone she didn't love? Someone who had been chosen for her because of her position? How could she tell him that the future she had imagined, the future where they might have a chance to be together, was slipping away? "I spoke with my father today," Lyra began, her voice quiet. "He wants me to choose a partner, someone who can help strengthen the Empire. The marriage is political, Jackson. It's not about love. It's about securing alliances and ensuring the future of the Shalzar Empire." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I agreed to it. I agreed to marry someone I don't love, because that's what my duty requires." Jackson's face softened with sympathy. "Lyra, No," Lyra interrupted, her voice stronger now. "You don't understand. I can't marry you, Jackson. You're from Earth. You're not the person my father would approve of. You're not what's best for the Empire. And I have to do what's best for my people." There was silence on the other end of the line. Lyra could see the hurt in Jackson's eyes, but there was also understanding. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and Lyra felt as though the air between them had thickened, the weight of her decision pressing down on both of them. Finally, Jackson spoke, his voice soft. "Lyra, you don't have to choose between your duty and your heart. You deserve to have both. But if you choose your duty, I'll respect that. I'll always respect you." Lyra's chest tightened at his words. She had never thought he would say that he would give her the space to make her own choice. She had expected him to fight for her, to demand that she follow her heart. But instead, he was offering her the freedom to choose. "I wish things were different," Lyra said softly. "I wish I could choose you. I wish I could have the life I want, with you by my side. But the Empire needs me. My people need me." "I know," Jackson said, his voice full of understanding.
I know, Lyra, but you deserve to be happy too.
You deserve to live a life that's true to you. Lyra felt a tear slip down her cheek, the weight of the moment too much to bear.
She had made her decision. She would marry for duty. But in her heart she knew that she would always wonder what could have been.
"I'll always care for you, Jackson," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper.
"But I can't be with you. I can't choose you." "Not now." Jackson's expression was a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "I'll always care for you too, Lyra, no matter what." As the conversation ended, Lyra sat in the quiet of the palace garden, her heart heavy. She had made her choice. But it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would carry the weight of her decision every day. She had chosen duty over love. But in the silence of the night, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice after all.